Good evening, people. Just going to give it a couple of minutes. I know a few of you are probably waiting for this stream to start. I'm going to wait for you to join and log on, and then we'll begin discussion and take a look at today's topic, which is an overview of the latest commercial release for the Spectrum Next, which is Bubblegum Brothers. Another one by Adrian Cummings of Spectrum Next Games, and I believe this is now the 5th title he's released in 12 months, which isn't bad going, but I suppose we'll see what's been put into this one. So let's let's have a look. Yeah, sorry, Mike. Right, yeah, how's it going, guys? Thanks for joining us. How's it going, John? You alright, fella? Nice to see you, Tony, joining up. Dave, of course. I know you sent me a few messages, Dave. I'll catch up in a bit. I've got, at the moment, I'm inundated with messages, so just bear with me. Yeah, I'm in like a crucial time at the moment. Everybody's come to me at once, so trying to catch up on everything. Plus, and I'm gonna blame you, Dave. I'm having big problems with Royal Mail at the moment. It's your fault. But no, I've had a few post issues which I've never had before, so I'm just trying to been seeing to those today. Some things that really shouldn't have happened. How's it going, Kev? Nice to see you joining on, mate. I had a feeling you would swing by and check this out. And I apologise for the ceiling glare. I'm trying to find the optimum position for my screen and for this, because I haven't got that much room on the table. I'm trying to eliminate glare, so yeah, sorry, Dave. Right, let's turn this a touch. That should. It hasn't quite killed the glare, but it kills it enough. Probably gives me a little bit more of the screen in frame. So you can just see at the side of the screen there, guys. That's the my funky Vectrex overlay, just showing up in the corner there. I got my Vectrex off to one side, the one that I demoed the other day. If you haven't seen that video, by the way, guys, go and see it. It's the new UV overlays for the Vectrex. Look absolutely stunning. How's it going, Tim? Nice to see you. I believe you're now coming to Revival in a couple of weeks' time. It'd be nice to see you there. Yeah, got a heady bunch of people coming. For those of you who don't know, and most of you obviously do, Revival 2019 is in 2 weeks. And yeah, it's just 2 weeks away now. We're just doing the final things. And although we've not been able to talk about it too much because of changing plans and people moving around, I think we're going to have the biggest official presence of Spectrum Next seen at any event yet. You can keep your Manchester. It even puts our recent years to shame. We're going to have a total of 8 Spectrum Nexts there, from what I understand, playing all manner of games. All the games I've showcased so far are going to be available to take a look at. You're going to be able to play the latest builds of a lot of those games, including our own Revival Survival. Not done much work on that recently, but I'll certainly have an update for you soon. But the guys have all been working, Kev here, Mike Daly, Jim, Mike Ware, everybody's been working on their own things. And you're going to be able to get hands-on with all of the things I've been showcasing recently, like Nextel, D-Paint, you know, the apps and things like that. Some of the games I haven't covered so far, and you're going to be able to see a whole load of Spectrum Next goodness there. I know a few people are getting a bit antsy because of the impending, you know, the deadline date that was set for when they should be here is arriving fast. And I know some people are becoming a little bit annoyed that the only place you can see the systems is at events, but at least there is an avenue there that makes it accessible for you to be able to come and check it out and see where everything's up to right before the point you're going to get your own next. It is right around the corner. I haven't got any more information than any of you guys have. I'm a total outsider, but I just want to say that I've been hyping this up, and I wouldn't be hyping it up if I didn't believe in it myself, and I wouldn't be talking it up and covering what I do. I think some people are going to be stunned to see just how much software is now available for this system. The OS has become more refined. The firmware, when it loads up, is a lot more stable than it once was. The guys have worked out how to utilise all the next features and hardware features. So you're starting to see a lot more from the systems. And if I just go into my browser here, for example, and there's some games here I won't be able to go into and show you just yet because I've been asked not to. But there's some games here for sure that I won't have been able to show you, and there will still be out. But if you look at this list of games here, right, there was some speculation not long ago that people were, it was a bit optimistic about how many games were in development for the next. As it turns out, there probably is as close to 50 games in the works or about to come out or already out, which is something I know a few people commented on before. Is that really happening? Yes, it is. And when you start to go down the list and look at the details, if you take a look at Mike C's site detailing all the next games, you'll see on there now that I think the count is up to about 40 something pieces of software. So we are rapidly getting to that point, and when it's at least, even though it's been delayed, when the next finally does arrive on your doorstep, you are going to have something to play on it straight out of the box. There was some concerns that, you know, there wouldn't be anything available, and that maybe, you know, that there'd be nothing handy to have. See, so people are already looking down my list here, looking at some clues. Right, I'm going to go down them and I'll tell you what I can and can't discuss. Right, so Angry Bloaters I've covered in detail. That's like a Bomberman-esque game based on a release that was done many years ago on the Spectrum originally. That's by Lampros Potamianos, and that was his kind of, what he said would be his, possibly his free game. It's quite a cool little Bomberman clone, and we've already covered that one. Baggers in Space, obviously I've got several versions of that on here, and I have got access to possibly one of the latest builds on here as well, but you're going to have to wait to see that event now, and very close now, you know, you're going to be able to get your hands on the final version of that. Bubblegum Brothers, of course, is the one I'm going to be covering today. I'll go into that in a minute. Delta Star Earth Defense, of course, one of the first release games for the system. The second one from Adrian Cummings, it's a vertical shooter. Dreamworld Pogie, I can't remember all the names behind that one, but yeah, that is like an action platformer. Very impressive looking. I think the gameplay has come a long way since the demos that have been included. Dungeonette, of course, the first commercial release game. Dweeb's Drop, which was the last game from Spectrum Next Games. Fire and Ice is a demo of a game which I think there is a next version, and there's also a version which utilises, I think it's ULA features for the Spectrum. I don't know the full details of that, but I haven't got permission to show that, so I won't do, I'm afraid. And yeah, it's not Ice World. Ice World is a completely separate project being worked on by Kev Brady, and it promises to be, from what I gather from my conversations with Kev, the first epic Spectrum game ever. And from the previews we saw in November, shame on you, anybody who missed Revival Zapped back in November. I got a first insight to that with Kev, and I saw some of the trailers and demos for that, and it's going to be an incredible game when it comes out. It's going to be the first kind of bona fide RPG game, and the graphics, the premise, the story behind it sounds incredible. So we'll see what happens. We're losing focus, guys. Okay, let me just turn on my Wi-Fi as backup. I'm Virgin, and I've had problems with Virgin dropping out on me, so I know it means occasionally it will blur out, but what I've done is I've basically using my 4G connection, because at least it's stable. You may lose quality occasionally, but at least it won't cut off. If I leave you just on Wi-Fi, for some reason my Virgin keeps cutting out completely and you'll lose connection, so I decided to turn my 4G on for this one. So just bear with me, guys. Montana Mike, of course, was the third release from Adrian Cummings. Nextoid, the first game I think we saw demoed at all, the Arkanoid clone. We've got, of course, Scramble on here, which was a surprise kind of unveiling by Mike, where something they did on the side, near perfect arcade port of Scramble, and it looks brilliant. And there you go, Kev's just given a little bit more information there on why Ice World will be delayed, and that's because he's still working on Melchior's Mansion, which of course I covered. Well, I did put some teaser pictures up about that the other day, but I'm not actually able to do a more in-depth video than I've already kind of covered on that. So, but yeah, I did get an inside look at that, and it is shaping up to be a brilliant remake of Attic Attack. We've got the Hollow Earth hypothesis, also from Lampros. We've got Warhawk, of course. Baggers in Space. There you go, Melchior's Mansion. That's the latest build that I was showing pictures of. Monkey McGee I've not covered yet, of course, and of course that will be coming from Three Guys team. That's Simon Butler, John Manus, and Sid Manhesso. So that'll be coming soon. Maybe I'll get another look at that soon. I didn't get a chance to do a video on that later last year. Maybe we'll be able to cover that soon. Now more work's been done. Nextipede, of course, the basic Centipede clone. There's actually a little Pac-Man demo which I happened to fall in my lap, but again I've not got permission to show that, so I can't show that one. All the various builds of Revival Survival on there. Up to the latest version, I think, which I think is dated in April. Yeah, but I'll go into that in another video when I've got more information on it. Does Mike Ware still plan to release the source to Scramble? I believe he's watching this video, so I'm sure he'll be able to answer that shortly for you, John. How's it going, Rich? Nice to see you on there. Tony, yeah, intelligent Wi-Fi my arse. I've already complained to Virgin about the quality of it. They've put changes in basically to try and sell you shitty Wi-Fi boosters, and I'm about to completely do away with their hub and go back to using my own because theirs is a piece of shit, and that's what's causing problems with my internet. So just bear with me on that one. And there you go, Mike's rejoined us after his shave. There's the final version of Scramble. We've got Spectron, of course, which I think is shaping up brilliantly. And I can't wait to play a full working version of that because I'm a massive fan of Robotron. And there's also another little game at the bottom there which I've not been able to show you just yet. Goes by the name of Tiverian, but we'll have a chat with Mike about that one. But that's something that I've not been able to show anyone yet, and hopefully we'll get to take a look at very soon. So you are seeing a few little sneak peeks here of what's in production at the moment. But anyway, what I was saying was, there's got to be already on my list here probably 20, 25 games in total. They're actually being, well in production by now. So, there's going to be, when you get your next, there's actually going to be a healthy software library to enjoy. And the good thing is you've already seen quite a lot of coverage on a lot of these. And from what we've seen, people are now starting to release screens of games that have been in production and just kept hush-hush for a long time. So there's a lot of free software being created, there's a lot of commercial ones, and everyone's just having a crack. Pac-Man can be shown at any time. That will evolve more later. You know what then, just because Mike's given permission, guys, here's another quick exclusive for you then. It's there's not much to it at the moment, but we'll just quickly load it up. And there we go. I've got a little bit of control. Oh, is there any collision yet, Mike? I don't know if there is, but looking at this, guys, as you can see, it's Pac-Man, and it's Pac-Man as you'd expect to see it, just like the arcade in the proper aspect ratio. Obviously, there's no HUD over on the right-hand side yet. There's no collision. You can't actually connect to the ghost, but the power pills are working. The dots are eatable. And I think once you collect all the dots, it just freezes up, I believe. But that just shows you now, like, the level of port that the Next is capable of doing. One of the good things a lot of people are going to be excited for is that obviously arcade porting is going to be something that is a lot more possible. I'm hoping that maybe some home coders will learn to do it and create those games. The experienced coders, of course, can't release certain games. And they can't release certain games because of IPs and all that. and the intention of Revival Survival was actually that it demonstrates how well a direct port of an arcade game can be done. Of course, there's no IP attached to that apart from my own, so obviously I said it's a perfect demonstration for it, and you've seen how well that's been developing. Obviously now we're at this point, people are starting to release these kind of free examples of things like this. Obviously you've seen Scramble, and there's another one I've been touched on. Not going to show just yet, just showing just how well proper authentic arcade ports can be done. But yeah, it'd be nice to see people at least maybe just do games inspired by arcade games but using original IPs. But at least we'll have gameplay that's very close to the arcade originals. So how's it going, Dave? Nice to see you on there. And yeah, so that is Pac-Man as it stands at the moment, and I think it looks really cool. So I'm impressed with that. So yeah, anyway, on to the subject of tonight's video. Now, the game I've been sent, I wasn't actually expecting to get it. It arrived in my inbox a few days ago. Adrian's been good enough to be sharing with me what he's been working on, and obviously because I gave some of his earliest games they're only true pre-release exposure, I suppose, and it's brought it to a lot of people who are following the next and people who aren't following the next. He's been continuing to send me software to give you the first looks at these things, and you know what? To his credit, he's been totally accepting of the criticism criticism I fed back to him. He's been totally accepting of the comments and suggestions people have been making. Whether that will actually impact what he continues to do, I don't know. But at very least, he's been good enough to kind of put himself out there and openly let me present these the way I want to. And I'm going to be as fair as I can when I look at these games, because we're starting to see a bit more now. So obviously I'm going to be referencing a lot more Spectrum Next games compared to just other games on the original Spectrum now, because there's a lot more to compare it to. So yeah, this is Bubblegum Brothers anyway. It is like I say, the fifth release from Adrian at Spectrum Next Games. The first, of course, being Dungeonette. Then we had Delta Star Earth Defense. Then we had Montana Mike. More recently, Dweeb's Drop was released, which was, I'm going to say now in reference, it's a fun little game, but not quite as polished maybe as it could be. But it's still a fun game, and it's a two-player experience. So of course that does add to the experience a little bit. And now we're in the the territory of the fifth game. We're expecting to see some bigger things. Now I've been following the development of this on his feeds on Facebook, and of course in the Spectrum Next groups. And a lot of people have been excited for this. Even previous critics who've said like maybe he's been a bit quick with the games, and they've said how on face value the stills and everything look pretty good. So I suppose people are keen to see how that's translated in reality. Now, unusually, I usually play these games quite a lot in advance of doing these videos for you. Now, I have been stuck for time, like I say. I am in the last rows of Revival organisation, and I wasn't planning to do another video, so it did kind of catch me off guard. However, I always feel it's prudent to kind of make yourself available and research these things in advance. This time, I've intentionally not played this game in advance, apart from a very brief check-in, because I want to show you it exactly as I experience it. I know a friend of mine, Dom, did a nice live capture from his PC using this game on C-Spect, which gave some people the first look at how it actually runs. But obviously this is the first live hardware demonstration. Shut up, Butler. So anyway, here we are, and let's get into Bubblegum Brothers. So loading up, we get this kind of imitation loading screen, raster bar effect. I always kind of like these little touches. It just adds a little bit of extra polish to it. And I'm just going to turn the sound up a little bit. So yeah, we've got a nice little presentation screen there. Quite quirky little characters, the Bubblegum Brothers. I quite like them. And this game is, of course, the first one that is actually dedicated two-player. Be interesting to see how that pans out. I haven't got anybody else here with me who I can show you two-player with to see how well it works, but it is at least there. So just thought I'd tell you that it is a two-player game, but I won't be able to show you two-player in action. So yeah, quite like the title music. A little bit of AY going on there. Quite catchy. And you can see you've got a few options on here. You've got your, well, the key map I think is default, and I think it stays as that permanently. You can call it the credits. There we go. We've got a few things we can do in game. G, turn the animations on and off. I believe that is the background animations. There were some comments during production as to where the background animations might distract. I actually think he's dialed it down a bit to make it less distracting. And you can turn the music on and off. We do actually have in-game music this time, which some people will be pleased to know. So we will press fire and we'll get into the game and we'll see how we go. So we do have two players on two joystick ports. There is no option. This one thing I'm going to point out now. The game defaults to automatically starting a two-player game. It's a design choice of Adrian's. It's not something I would have chosen, but yeah, I'm going to address that. You will see two players up. It will automatically start a two-player game, and to continue as one player, you do have to continue on your own. I'll take you through the game and then I'll give you my thoughts on it afterwards. Feel free to make any comments or anything as we go, and I'll try to answer them. So we collect some things for points, we collect some things for extra lives. We've got some upgraded shots, we've got level warp, invincibility and freeze, and so in we go. And you'll notice obviously that I'm playing this on my with my Kenston joystick this time rather than my controller. There's a very good reason for that, which I'll go into shortly, but let's just show you a bit of the gameplay and then we'll see what we think from there. So the game itself, very akin to Bubble Bobble, as you would imagine it to be with a name like Bubblegum Brothers. However, rather than actually trapping the enemies within a bubble, your bubbles simply kill the enemies. Like I say, this is actually my first time like playing it properly. I don't know how many enemies you have to destroy, but it seems that when you destroy them, they do respawn to a certain rate. And right now, the enemy patterns are pretty straightforward. They just trot down from the top of the screen, make their way down the screen. There's bubbles popping up and down the side. They occasionally release points or power-ups. One of them is there, which is level warp. So we're on to level 2. You can see that player 2 has already died and gone off screen. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure why Adrian's done that. That's a design choice of his, but that's not something personally I would have gone with, but there it is. So we've got a time stopper there, which will help me kill some of these guys off. We've got lollies and pies and bits of fruit, obviously for points bonuses. Missed the power up there. We've got an extra long shot, I think that is. Yes, it takes your shot a lot further. And we've got another time stop there. And we've got a level warp. There's always level warp power-ups coming in. I'll catch up with your comments in a minute, guys. I'm just trying to focus on the game at the moment, just to show it as best I can before I address what you're saying. But I'll come back to you all in just a second. Let's try and grab that parrot off. Unless I'm dead, of course. Okay, so I'll give it another try now. And let's see if I can do a little bit better second time round. You notice the bubbles actually bounce off the walls in this. That's a bit different to Bubble Bobble. Yeah, I did think it would be close to Bubble Bobble in that the way it would trap the enemies and take them to the top of the screen for bursting. And I'll just see in a minute actually if the keys do stop that background animation like it said. I hit G, I think it was. Yeah, that freezes the background animation. You can see that the rainbow doesn't animate. I mean, it's nicely drawn. You know, the stage design is what you'd expect from a Bubble Bobble-esque clone. Big characters though, which kind of fill the platforms a little bit more. But yeah, the perspective seems about right. The patterns and everything are a bit harsh on the eyes, but I'm used to seeing that on Snow Brothers or, you know, Rainbow Islands and things like that. Yeah, pretty basic at this point. It's quite difficult because the enemies fall from the top of the screen kind of without warning when they respawn. Rather than dropping centrally, they drop in random places, and that can make it difficult to get up near the top of the screen at risk of being killed. So, got to be careful there. And let's see if we're going to at least get past level 2 this time. An extra life there, I think. Get that helps. But then I'm going to lose a life straight away as they fall on your head. You've really got to... It's the kind of game where you just literally got to avoid the top of the screen because those enemies can just drop right on your skull. That's slightly off-putting. Let's see what it takes to actually complete a stage. I'm not going to collect a level warp if a level warp appears. They seem to appear with quite a lot of... Let's see, there's one just appeared there. They seem to appear with quite a lot of regularity, which is slightly worrying. I mean, it's playable, it's controllable. You know, I imagine in 2-player it's a little bit more fun. But yeah, I'm just trying to get through the stage here. See if I can make it to stage 2. I'm assuming by killing enough enemies you get to stage 2 anyway. I'm hoping so. Don't tell me you have to collect a level warp to get to stage 2, because if that's the case, the level could be over in seconds or it could be over in too long. Because the enemies are just respawning. You can jump up a level, but you can't jump down a level, so you have to walk off the edge of platforms to get off. Yeah, I'm just staying away from that top platform because it's just suicide. There you go, suicide to go up there. But yeah, I don't seem to be completing the level here. You must have to collect the warp to go to the next stage. Okay. We'll give it one more try. Let's see if we can do better than stage 2 this time. Well, straight away I can walk to stage 2 there because that's the way that dropped. I'm guessing then if you don't have to kill all the enemies to progress to the next stage, I can just hang around for a level warp. Or maybe the level warp only appears after you've killed so many enemies. Not entirely sure. It's markedly harder than the previous games from r.a.m.s, I can tell you that. Mainly because of that issue at the top of the screen there, but there we go, level warp. There's level 3. I'm going to see if I can I'm going to linger up here and try and avoid having things drop on my skull. So I'm assuming if I just kill enough, the level warp power up will appear, and that's how you progress to the next stage. That's a nice little power up there. It's definitely fast. You've got to be on your toes, and you've got to have lightning reactions to avoid those ones dropping from the top of the screen. I can tell you that for nothing. Whoa! Right in the back of your head as well. I think I'm better off over here, I think. I'll wait for them to drop down. Power up at least. Oh, I lost the life there. So I'm guessing that either the level warp appears after so many hits or after so many kills, and you literally have to just keep shooting until that level warp appears. I thought it would just progress you once you killed so many enemies on stage, but it doesn't appear to be the case. So there's no change in the enemy movements as of yet. We've still got the same enemies as in stage 1. Let's grab that life, I'm going to need it, I think. So I'd find a place to stand that's safe on this stage, but just see if I can find a safe spot. I think this should do it. And then I can wait around and kill enemies here until the level warp appears. At least my points are racking up. Now I'm not sure if there's boss fights or anything to that description, but I'm guessing we'll find out shortly. If I can get past this stage. Extra life is always welcome. Invincibility, nice. I'll grab that extra life over there as well. That was handy, let me kill quite a few there. That's the first time the invincibility's appeared anyway. Get off that platform, it's dangerous. With invincibility. Just try and kill as many as I can with my invincibility. Grabbing a few extra lives while I'm at it. The frequency does seem very random on those item drops. I'm just wondering when I'm going to complete this stage. Seems like I've been going for ages. Oh, there's 2 of them there, 3 of them. I apologise for the clicking, I have got a very clicky Kempston. Guess we will find out in a few minutes if we encounter a boss fight. I'll see how I get on with this set of lives. Once I finish this game, I'll pause and take a look at some of your comments, guys, so just bear with me. And it's a bit faster than the other games I've played so far, so I've got to kind of keep my attention on it to try and show you anything of the game. I usually do practice to get a bit better at these games before I show them you, but obviously, like I said, I haven't done that this time because I wanted to give you my genuine first impressions of it. Come on. Where's the level exit, man? Do I have to collect so many of those stars, maybe? And I've just been missing them? Ah, there we go. Finally. At least the enemies pause for a brief moment when you start the level. Whoa! They really do drop on top of you there. You've got to be really careful. I tell you what, you could go from having lots of lives to having no lives very quickly if you ain't got your wits about you. There you go, I took a couple of hits there. So see if I can get, I've heard there is a boss fight, so let's see if I can get at least to a boss and then I can move on and have a look at some of your comments. So just see what it takes to get there. You really have got to be fast on this. I'm genuinely like wide-eyed focused on this. you know, you definitely need reactions, but the patterns and that, it's very hard to kind of predict, like pattern recognition or anything like that, because the patterns are so very random. I can understand that to an extent, but it does make it difficult to get a consistency from one stage to the next, so we'll see how that pans out anyway. See how many stages there are up until the first boss fight. I'll just take them all out from here, I think. Oh, no, time to move. Oh, I want that. Damn it. There we go, let's get up there. Ah, oh, missed it. Better be another one soon. There we go. I'll grab those, thanks. It's a good first wave of enemies gone. Oh, this is a difficult stage to find any platforming on. Grab that, that'll help. Just take these out while walking into them. Get my power up. Ah, okay, so here we go. Oh. So we do get a music change at this point, and I suppose you've got to deal with those at the same time as it attacks you. Thing moves a bit fast, don't like that. Hit. Trying to see if he's got a pattern to work to. Die? Having the other enemies to contend with certainly adds a bit of challenge there. It was just him on his own, I think I'd easily deal with him, but... No, don't run out of lives. I think I might do, though. Get down here. Git. No safe spots. Ah, gotcha. Okay, so yeah, nice little intermission screen there. Right, and so on to stage 2. So we have got a bit of a mix-up of the enemies now. A little bit slower, but do they have any more damage? No, they're still just one hit. Quite like the music. Spooky shit. That tree's fucking evil, look at it. I'm warping through the levels a bit quick here. Not sure if the level warps are... I don't know if the placement related or whether they're random or whether it's how many enemies you kill, but they seem to be dropping really quick. Okay, whoa. I'm getting through this one a lot quicker. Maybe there's a slight fail in the logic there as to how often they should drop. Come on, get the extra life. Only got 3 lives left. Die, evil tree. Yeah, go with that. To get out of the way. I'll bet when the level skip thing drops, it's going to come from at the top of the screen. I'm going to be able to get my way around to get it quickly. Oh, I miss the extra life again. There it is. Got it. We might be able to make our way to the level 2 boss at this rate pretty quick, so let's see how that pans out. Oh, that's a nice safe, well, semi-safe spot to jump from there. Oh, I need that. No, I really don't want to be here. Dangerous spot. Yeah, the background animations, I have my concerns about those. I thought they might be a little bit distracting, but at least they've been dialed down in colour intensity. They were as colourful as the foregrounds in the original previews. and a few of us actually suggested to Adrian to turn those down, make them a little bit darker, and I do think it's done enough to not distract you while you're playing at least. So getting close here. Let's see if we can make our way to the next boss with any luck. If my lives last that long. No! No! Right. Right, okay. Well, this dude's a bit fast. I'm going to be forced to go to the top of the screen here, which is the most dangerous spot. Yeah, I'm definitely going to run out of lives on this dude. I think the plan here is to drop, maybe not. Okay, so I'm down now, shit. I thought I'd be able to drop down, get a few hits and continue cycling, but maybe not quite. So, anyway, yeah, thoughts. I'm going to take a quick look down the list and take a quick look down the list and see what your comments say, guys. So bear with me. I know there's been a lot of commenting while I've been on that, so bear with me. I'm going to go right back. Right, so there was Butler's Get On With It. So I know that's roughly where I started playing. Can we turn the narration on and off? Bollocks. What if you have no friends? Okay. On the packaging images, use your jetpack to jump and fire bubblegum at the monsters. That suggests your jetpack fires bubblegum. Maybe it does. I think on some of the artwork it did show that they get some kind of bubble power from it. I don't know. I don't know how the difficulty would change with two-player, Tim. It does two-player by default. I am slightly disappointed with that because I don't think it would take much to implement a selectable one-player, two-player mode. I'm not quite sure why he's gone with that decision. However, I've just successfully played a one-player game there and I did completely ignore the second player. So, okay, it doesn't affect gameplay. It is slightly unpolished though to do that. I don't know. But yeah, it's yeah, it doesn't detract. I don't know how the difficulty would change in two-player mode. Looking at this, you'd love to see an option for no background at all, pure black retro style. Yeah, I can understand that, Jeremy. I remember what you were saying while it was in production. Obviously, I know you have issues with your sight and things like that, and it may be a little bit too distracting. You can at least cease the animation like that, and it does make it slightly less distracting. It's difficult to kind of portray that difference unless you're actually playing, but when I was playing then, I do quite easily get distracted, and even the animated backgrounds didn't distract me too much. The foreground characters are pretty bold. The movement on them is pretty recognisable from the background. So yeah, but yeah, I can understand what you mean. But maybe that would make it a bit too basic, a bit too close to the original Bubble Bobble. So I think that's just purely an aesthetic choice. Plays nothing like Bubble Bobble, it seems. Yeah, it's a lot less like Bubble Bobble than I anticipated, Dave. But I do know from talking to Adrian originally that he did say it would be less like Bubble Bobble than everybody was saying, and would be more like Bubble Symphony, which is it one of the sequels, or is it a completely unrelated, well, similar style but unrelated game? Yeah, you do tend to. It's more of a platform, like a platform shoot 'em up, than it is, you know, a bubble containment and bursting kind of affair like Bubble Bobble is. Looking at the cute graphics, it would have appealed to a set of younger players at Play Expo. Yeah, Tim, you know what? The graphics, I'm going to highly praise the graphics. I'm very happy with the presentation and how it looks. The graphics are nice, the animations are nice, the characters have got a lot more detail and a lot more character to them than what I've seen in like previous games like Montana Mike, for example, from Adrian. So he's definitely dialed that up a touch. I mean, these little mushroom guys here, they've got, you know, their hats kind of bounce up and down as they walk. The trees have got foot and arm animations and their mouths open and close. you know, little things like that, and it does make for us, you know, slightly better graphics and things like that. I also like that he's created his own font with the graded style as well. I like the you know, the little touches like that set it apart from you know, what could be a very basic function, you know, like a solid block colour, for example, in the typical basic Spectrum font or the Namco font, if you know what I mean. But yeah, I mean, it is appealing to look at for sure. Lollies, pies and lives. Yeah, okay, Tony. Yeah. There we go. Simon being, yeah, I can respect that, Simon, yeah. The characters, they could have been a little bit more smaller to make them look more vulnerable. But yeah, they are nicely drawn. Maybe to do with the... I suppose, I don't know whether the characters have already been taken. I think part of these were taken from another game that Adrian worked on before. And maybe rather than redraw them, he's just basically ported them over and scaled them verbatim, if you know what I mean, over. And maybe that doesn't translate as well to the next screen. I'm not entirely sure, you know, in the next resolution. But yeah, they are very nicely drawn characters. And you know, the player characters themselves I do like as well. The bubblegum comes with a nice animation from the mouth. Yeah, it certainly does, Tim. I can't fault the visuals. I can't fault the visuals. They're pretty good. Yeah, can't jump down through the platforms. Although I'm going to say there that if you're going for that bubble platforming style, you couldn't actually jump down on that either. You could only jump up, and the idea was to traverse down the bottom of the screen. I think you could actually jump up off the top of the screen and rejoin the bottom on Bubble Bobble. I could be wrong on that one, but yeah, I think the platforming type, it might feel a bit alien based on our modern sensibilities, but it is definitely how Bubble Bobble and its clones, you know, would have played back in the day. Bubble Bobble certainly does. No letter collection for some special reward. No letter collection on this. I thought there might have been an extra or something like that, but no, not quite there. However, it does have the boss fights with a decent regularity, whereas you think back to... I know I talk about Bubble Bobble a lot, and it's more different from that than we originally thought, but I think that the original Bubble Bobble, the only boss fight you had was at the very, very end. Was it level 150? So that could get quite monotonous in a way. At least this is every 8 stages you've got a boss fight, so it does mix up the challenge in a slightly different way. Not a fan of respawning enemies personally. Happens a lot in retro games. Yeah, it does, Jeremy. It seems to be a trope of retro games, but then again, you know, the next is still trying to give a nod to, you know, the old as well as showing a bit of the new. So I think I can forgive that. The respawn rate is a little quicker than I would anticipate. Maybe that's been done to just dial up the difficulty somewhat. But, I mean, yeah, you can see how quick they drop back down after dropping at the top of the screen. And the respawn rate, like as soon as you killed something, it respawned the next enemy. So, I don't know. Maybe a selectable difficulty would have been a nice touch. But, yeah, definitely playable. Dave, it looks a bit tedious if I'm honest. Honest. Now, it's... I mean, I've not played it enough to make that kind of judgment, Dave. But I am interested. I mean, I've played it now through to the end of level 2, and I think it's got enough to make me come back and want to play those stages again and see what the next boss fight. You know, they come with, you know, quite, you know, they come on quite quick every 8 stages or so, I assume. So I think I'll be interested to see what each stage brings in terms of theming and things like that. Maybe not between individual stages, there's not a massive amount of variety if you stick in with the same enemies for each stage. But at least you've got the boss fights to break that up, and at least the theming of the graphics and everything does keep it a little bit interesting. Yeah, Lampros. It is colourful and some pretty animations, but seems a little bit repetitive, a bit boring after a while. However, Lampros, maybe when you've got it in two-player mode, maybe it will give you more of a motivation to continue playing. You know, maybe that will mix it up a bit. I mean, you got to remember when it came to Spectrum games back in the day, there weren't that many simultaneous two-player games. The only ones you tended to find that were simultaneous two-player tended to be either arcade conversions or arcade-derived games that came later in the life cycle, maybe, you know, 1 to 8K games, for example. I mean, obviously you would have memory limitations for what could be displayed on screen as well. So it's nice to see some two-player games arising. The next, of course, always going to be capable of that, and you know, it's nice now to actually start seeing some two-player games starting to come out. And yeah, I think two-player will make it a little bit more interesting. But yeah, I can understand what you're saying as regards to repetitiveness. But then again, isn't that just isn't that a kind of trope of old games in general? I don't know. Paul, so is that it? Yeah, there's a boss fight after the 8th. Yeah. Missing the ability to jump upward using the bubbles. Yeah, the bubbles behave a lot different in this to how they do on Bubble Bobble, or like with Rainbow Islands, even where you use the projectiles to stand on and progress up the stages. That might have been a nice feature because it would allow you to progress up the screen on stages like this, for example, where you've only got a narrow platform. Your actual positioning needs to be very precise to be able to land on those platforms, to be able to progress up the screen. As you saw there when I was fighting this boss fight, I needed to drop off the bottom of the screen to get into position to get him when he's at his most vulnerable. It tended to be his moves down to the corners or up to the top corners. Yeah, a way to progress up the screen may have been nice, but obviously if you didn't want the bubble capture thing to be part of it, then the bubbles are more of a, you know, an offensive projectile rather than I suppose some kind of catching fishing net, if you know what I mean. Right, having to drop out the level to reach the top of those regional platforms isn't fun. It's pretty much what I'd expect from this type of game, though. Admittedly, no energy meter. No, at least you do get an indication when you are striking them. I know when on certain games I've played so far, I know that on a Delta Star Earth defense you didn't really get an indication when you're actually hitting the boss. Even Warhawk, initially the flashing was very dim, and I said it was something that could be dialed up. And admittedly, Mike did dial up the flashing of the boss when you were making contact with your shots. And on this, at least you've got a physical indication that they're being hit. So even though there's no energy meter, at least you know you are making contact with your shots. Hi Paul, hi Steve, hi Russell, thanks for joining. I don't know if you're still here. Paul, it's pretty enough, but I'm not sure there's enough about the game mechanic to make you come back to it. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie, guys. Part of my critique now, I mean, I'm not trying to fully review these games because I don't think the games have been given enough of a chance just yet to either sell themselves or to sell themselves to you. I'm trying to promote the Next as a system as a whole and show you really what type of things are coming. I do see a lot of the early games, even though of course this is a commercial release, I do see a lot of the games right now, especially pre-system release, as more technical pieces than they're more like advanced tech demos, I would say, than hardcore games, if you know what I mean. And I mean, yeah, I mean, like a lot of the games I've played so far, I could say very, very similar about, especially some of Adrian's first couple of games because they're very short. Dungeonette, once you know where you're going, isn't that long. Montana Mike is only 4 stages, so once you've got it mapped out, you do see him get to the end of it. Obviously, I couldn't address those in my first comments. Now time's moving on, I'm certainly going to be addressing those, and I will address that now, yeah. For some people, the type of gameplay that's in this, I would say it is a little bit repetitive. You're either into that kind of thing or you're not. I mean, if you think back to trying to give an example of some games now, going back to the actual Spectrum days, or even just the 8-bit days, the type of games where you would have, you know, gone through similar gameplay. Somebody help me out here. There's got to be a lot of games, I'm sure. I mean, even arcade games were guilty of it. You know, Pac-Man, you're repeating the same board every time. You're presented with a similar challenge on every screen, and yet somehow you still like to come back and enjoy playing it. Space Invaders, it's a similar pattern on every screen. The only thing that changes is how low down the invaders start. You know, I know we've come a long way since then. I know we expect to see a bit more now. So yeah, it's a fair criticism, and yeah, I think going forward, the complexity of the games needs to take a step up, and I'm sure Adrian's aware of that. He will be watching this video back, and he's not watching it live tonight, but he will be watching this video back. Yeah, and I think that's a fair criticism, but that's just down to game preference, you know what I mean, I would say anyway. I'd say that there's definitely more, yeah, John just said there, it might be funner as 2-player, not sure if 2-player is competitive or co-op. I would say it's cooperative, John, in that you're still going to be destroying the same enemies and taking on the same bosses, but obviously you're going to have to share power-ups, and obviously you've got your own score. So I suppose it's going to be more of, it's going to be competitive in trying to get, cooperative in trying to reach the end, but of course you're going to be competing with your final scores, I would imagine. Yeah, a few more arcs in the boss movements. I think the boss movements will probably progress as you go further up the game. I mean, I've been sat looking at this bee now for ages, and I can see that obviously his pattern, I can now recognise the pattern, and I could probably follow that if I. But while you're actually playing the game, because you've got the distractions of the standard enemies dropping down, it does make his movement appear more random than it actually is. So again, it's a perspective thing. Through a lens like you're seeing it now, might seem pretty straightforward, but it is very fast-paced while you're playing, and so everything does appear to be a lot more random and a lot more challenging than it appears here. Yeah, it is visually very nice. Detection zones are out on the enemies. Yeah, I did notice a slight issue with collision detection, Mike. Leftward ones drop a little earlier than when walking right. Maybe that's an ambiguity of the platform design, but yeah, I can see that now. The ones that are walking to the right are going completely to the end, whereas when they're coming this way, let's just see if any enemies do, they seem to kind of fall through the platform. They kind of come off the centre of it. Yeah, it's not something I noticed during gameplay, but yeah, certainly an observation in terms of polish, maybe. Hi Darren, thanks for joining us. Jumping Jack, Painter 3D, Hungry Horace, Frog was pretty much the same thread. There you go, Jeremy's just helped me out there with games which, you know, are fairly repetitive in terms of level design. Level difficulty needs to be tweaked as you jump through the forest levels far easier than the originals. Yeah, I do think the placement of the level warps seems to be a little bit too random. Maybe, I don't know if there is a prompt as to certain enemies you destroy, or maybe key enemies, or whether the level warp does just appear at random, because on some of those early stages I was destroying loads of enemies, but it wasn't appearing for quite, you know, for several minutes. So I don't really know there. I suppose a few replays I'll be able to tell you that. The bubbles fire through the enemies. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite sure how the collision works on those, Mike. Maybe a few more replays. I think you guys are in a better position to judge that than I was, because obviously I was just jumping around like a loon. We'll give it one more play and we'll see if any of those points you've raised kind of register in my head whilst I'm actually gaming. I'm going to turn the music off as well, so I can, I suppose, so I can commentate a bit more whilst I'm going. So I think it was T to turn tunes off. So right, so we'll start a new game and we'll see how far we get with this. There we go. So tunes are off. Leave the background animations on. I'm quite fine with that. Yeah, that level warp does appear very quickly, although it does disappear quick, so you do have to be quick to nab it. I suppose it's more, rather than targeting the enemies in order to get the level warp, you're actually spending more of your time avoiding the enemies and trying to stay alive until the level warp appears. So rather than an offensive game, it's more of a defensive game. So your shooting is not capturing and aiming for a score that way, but just trying to eliminate as many enemies as you can in order to keep yourself alive until the level warp appears. Maybe that's what Adrian was going for, and that's why he went with the decision to have the level warp as the way to end the level, rather than having to destroy all the enemies on screen, for example. So, I mean, I'm taking my time here and just basically avoiding all the enemies rather than trying to kill them. And we'll see how quickly the level warp appears this way. It does mean that I stay quite near the top of the screen. I suppose I could stay in the middle. There we go. So it appears. So yeah, you're spending more time avoiding, but obviously you're not racking up the points that way. So yeah, you are encouraged to engage to be able to get more points. And I suppose it's more of an element of you're spending more time avoiding and then just deciding how intense you want it to be. I see what you mean there about the collision detection. I think there's a bit like with Montana Mike's whip. I think there's like a dead spot in the first blast there that goes away once it's expanded to a full bubble. Could be wrong now. Yeah, it doesn't actually affect the way, I suppose, I'm tackling the levels, and so far it's not made a difference between life or death in a situation, so maybe it's not a problem. But yeah, a fair point to make, Mike. Fair point to make. So I guess, you know, going forward, replaying this, a better strategy is actually to find safe zones on the screen where you can score points from easily, and then to kind of linger in that zone to maintain your life as long as possible until the level warp bubble appears. That seems to be the strategy, rather than going on the offensive. Even if you're chasing a high score, it'd be better for me to linger around this zone here and occasionally grab things like the extra lives or the points from the top once I've cleared a few enemies out, because I don't think it ever actually shows more than 4 enemies at a time. So if I linger up here, for example, I'll be dead pretty much instantly, whereas if I go off the top of the screen like that and just linger around the bottom away from them, dual no invincibility. There it is. Great. Yeah, it didn't take as long then. Employing that strategy that I've just talked about there, rather than just blowing bubbles like a loon, does seem to be the way to play this. Rather than just going on the offensive like you would on Bubble Bobble. Maybe I'm stuck in that mindset because it reminds me so much of that game. But yeah, now I've changed my strategy. I'm still having to think fast and pay attention to where the enemies are dropping. But I've changed my strategy now. I'm kind of staying in the midfield, find a way to stay alive, grabbing those extra lives as and when they appear, and then just, you know, keeping my distance until the level warp bubble appears, and occasionally grabbing those power-ups, you know. Yeah, because staying up there is definitely dangerous to do. Yeah, so I mean, you know, it could just be me. I am an optimist, and I am trying to keep optimism in games that I'm seeing high, because obviously the next isn't out yet. People's expectations at the moment aren't what they will be once the system is out, and I'm sure people will start to make their own games that will have their foibles, I suppose. Whilst the pros do a lot better. Maybe then the critique will increase for some people, maybe like Adrian or some of the other guys, because obviously people would expect a bit more. I suppose for myself, at this point, I mean, I'm not giving a concise review here, I think maybe I did expect a little bit more content, if you know what I mean, from this being the 5th game, especially after Dweeb's drop, which is a little bit more basic in its action. However, it is 2-player. It does look very nice. The music and everything's nice. You've got a few more options in terms of the graphics and the music playing, and the action is a lot more frantic. It is a lot more difficult than Adrian's other games. How that's been achieved might not be to everyone's agreement, but at least the difficulty is there this time. I don't think you're going to blast through this in an afternoon like you would do with Dungeonette if you're good at mapping those type of games. But yeah, it's a lot more playable game. It's quirky, it's fun, and yeah, a little bit more polish might have been nice, and maybe a little bit more content. But it's not fully disappointing. There's a few choices maybe I wouldn't have done myself. But yeah, I think it's like a game that's worthy to add to your collection. And I think in 2-player, it will probably have a little bit more merit than it does in single player. I mean, I can imagine the screen gets very busy in 2-player. And it does still baffle me slightly that you can only start in 2-player. But, I mean, it controls well, it plays well. One thing I should mention, though, is I'm playing this on my Kempston joystick for the reason I mentioned, which is that there's no control option for, like, a joypad. Now, whereas, obviously, this is a game that might benefit from multiple buttons, having, like, a jump button and a bubble button, there's nothing put in place for that. So, even if you're using a joypad, up is still jump, and fire is still fire. That's great while you're on a keyboard, but it's not great if you're using a joypad, because when you're quickly flicking left and right, you're also tapping up, so you end up jumping by accident. When I first turned the game on, I did have it set up with a joypad, and I found it absolutely infuriating. So I do think going forward I know the preference is there for the Kempston or the keyboard, but I think going forward with the type of games that are going to be made and released, I think Adrian's going to need to stop to put in more control options and a little bit more configurability for the user. Definitely now. Like I say, this is the 5th game now, so I'm not going to be as lenient as I've been in the past. And yeah, it'd be nice to see a little bit more, but as a game, yeah, I am quite happy with it. Expectation might be slightly different for some people. I'm more easily impressed, I'll be honest, but yeah, I like it. It's a quirky game. It's definitely playable. I mean, I'm playing this while I'm talking to you, and I am finding it unusually addictive, you know what I mean? That's why I think as a 2-player game, when there's 2 of you to bounce comments off each other and kind of reflect on each other's performance as you go, I think it would be a slightly better experience. But yeah, definitely a quirky little game. But I'm going to allow myself to die here, just so I can return back to silence for a little while. And look at the rest of your comments there. So, right, okay, I'm just going back through your comments, guys. Bear with me 2 seconds. Right, sometimes when you bubble fire through enemies, yeah, I'll address that. The older games were limited due to limited RAM, or in some cases none. So they were repetitive out of necessity, and time was spent on the gameplay instead. Yeah, I suppose so, Mike, yeah. Like I say, I think it's a fair criticism. The game definitely has limited appeal for some people, I would guess, based on the style of gameplay there is. There is a lot more capacity to have added a few more gameplay elements, maybe even bonus stages perhaps, where you rush to collect all the objects and outscore your opponent perhaps to win an extra life. Maybe something to make the enemies more aggressive, if you're taking too long on a stage. I know that was something that Bubble Bobble had, even back then. So yeah, maybe something like that could have been added. The enemies were not fully spawned until they landed on the first platform. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Yeah, I'll think about that one there, Tony. The boss when destroyed just vanishes. Would be nice to see him jump up in flames or something. Some kind of reward. Well, the cake did drop from the top of the screen. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying there, Mike. Maybe it's just a style choice. I don't know. I suppose only Adrian can answer that one. I missed the chest from Rainbow Island goalie. Yeah, definitely, Jeremy. There's a guy porting Parasol Stars to the C64 to see if he could have a go on the next two. Yeah, definitely be interesting to see. I mean, I was keen to see the original games redone and the proper arcade games done as much as anybody, and it was impressive to see how well Scramble ported across. However, what you've got to remember, for the longevity of the system, you've got to be able to do... You've got to be able to kind of give a nod to the old games and use those familiar styles, but ultimately only like new IPs and new games with changes from the originals will carry it forward. So at least, I suppose this has been changed enough from what we thought would just be a straightforward Bubble Bobble clone to make it something in its own, if you know what I mean. Yeah, up his jump, Jeremy. That makes perfect sense, like I say, when you're dealing with a joystick. You know, you've got one fire button, up will be jump. And whilst you're holding a joystick, that's not a limitation, that does feel very natural. But when you switch to a joypad, yeah, there's no way to switch your controls. Like, for example, with like Baggers in Space, I know that when you're using a joypad, I mean, you can use a joypad or a joystick, but the second it detects that you've got extra buttons available, it will assign that button to Dynamite rather than having to press down and fire. On games like Revival Survival, the full control system hasn't been implemented yet, but it's been made entirely with a multi-button joypad in mind. You can play it nice with a joystick, and I do like to play it with a joystick, but it's been designed with two buttons in mind, and hopefully we'll be able to implement a way of being able to use jump and shoot using a joystick where you've only got one button, but we'll see what happens with that. Redefining the keys, I'll take a look at that right now actually, Mike. I'll see if you can actually do that. So we'll go back to the screen here. If I hit K, oh, okay, so it seems you can change the keys. I'll just turn this down slightly, sorry guys. Stupid screen. It's got a slightly dodgy panel, so I have to, when I press volume down, it activates the menu. Right, so it doesn't look like you can actually assign whatever keys you want, but if you press K, you can just see on the screen there that it changes the assignment from, I think, the standard QALP-M arrangement to QALP and space, which I suppose is very similar. Just takes your hand slightly further across on a 48K keyboard, and PLZXM. So, so I'm guessing that's more of a kind of a left-hander's control scheme, because if you look at the keyboard, that takes P and L, that means up and down are over on this side, and left and right are down on this corner. That makes sense, I suppose. However, you would think if that was a left-hander's control scheme, that fire would actually also be over here, where Z and X is maybe assigned to C, or even cap shift. So yeah, but yeah, it's kind of a left-handed layout, that is, I suppose. And then we've got KM, ZX and space. Yeah, but again, KM, ZX and space. Yeah, you're still using your right hand to fire. I would think if that was a left-handed control scheme, ideally the fire button should have been over on the left somewhere. But yeah, so you can at least change the control somewhat. No warning when invincibility runs out. I think there was actually an audio cue there, Tony, but I don't think you could hear it quite on the video. Level editor would have been nice. Yeah, I guess so, Jeremy. I mean, maybe, I suppose depending on how he's feeling at some point in the future. At the end of the day, you're going to be able to, I mean, as I demonstrated with Nextel, you're going to be able to download things and you know, games and applications and things using Nextel. You've got the Wi-Fi, you know, capable system. There's no reason I wouldn't imagine why creators of games couldn't create like later patched versions that have got slightly extra content, maybe a level editor that plugs into this somehow, you know what I mean? Or even user created content, do you know what I mean? Okay, maybe you might need to release a source to be able to do that, but there is good, I suppose there's a facility there. So I suppose if at any point someone did want to you know, add something like that, there'd be a facility there to be able to do that in future. I suppose that would be good for bug fixes and everything as well. DLC done right, not like the current business model on modern consoles. Yeah, Lampros just said there, it's a choice of ready-made sets of keys. Maybe the next needs a mascot like Roland. I think it's already got a few little mascots starting to appear. I've got to be honest, I do quite like these little Bubblegum Brother characters. I think they're quite cool. I did like the dweebs as well. I think that something could be done with the dweebs that obviously that Adrian used for his last game. I think something else could be done with those. I've had a few ideas for games that have got their own little mascots. As for a dedicated mascot, maybe something will come just naturally through the scene, you know, rather than like an artificially created one or a forced one. Yeah, I think possibly one may arise, or maybe even an old character will become resurrected that ends up becoming the mascot. Who owns the IP rights to Horace? I think you've already spoken to him this evening, Jeremy. You know what these retro IP owners are like. Yeah. Baggers in the Cave or Baggers Through Time, maybe is a sequel. Yeah, Baggers has become a bit of a mascot. Baggers versus Blaggers. Baggers goes to Hollywood. That would be an interesting one to see. Baggers plushies. Oh God. You know what? Hats off to anybody who makes the first gym plushie. It's going to look like an evil voodoo doll or something. Oh, Mike just said that. Sorry, Mike. Like that the vertical border is being used. Can we push it into the left and right border? Yeah, a little bit about that actually, Jeremy. I'm glad you pointed that out. That's something that we've done with my game as it happens. This is now displaying. I've now locked off the next into 60 Hz mode, and thankfully, this game, I think one of Adrian's earlier games, forced you into 50 Hz. I could be wrong about that, or it acted strange when it was in 60 Hz, but that might have been an old firmware revision that caused that. Yeah, something you'll have seen in a few games now, and it's something I said is going to be, I think it'll be utilised a lot, is that you can actually offset certain things into the border space. Now there's a little bit of overscan on this screen, which was highlighted when I did the scramble coverage not long ago. There was a few different screen options which might put in, which actually shifted the score on that, because the playing field actually went up into that area, and the overscan forced the score to be too far off the top of the screen, and some of your HUD to be too far down. Now obviously Adrian's gone with a typical mid-range scan area, and if you look, the writing that's in the border area actually fits perfectly to about the top of my screen without any risk of it going off, and he's done similar at the bottom there. So yeah, there's certainly a field to play with. You didn't have to worry too much about overscan back in the day, because obviously the border couldn't be used in that way, but obviously now you can use it. Anybody who's designing games, it does mean you've got a little bit of extra space to use, but how you use it is going to depend heavily on how many sprites and stuff you've got on the screen. I don't know the full technicalities of it. From what I understand, what you're doing is you're basically creating sprite tiles, which I think are 8x8, and the sprite count I think was recently increased in one of the most recent firmware revisions, which actually allowed us to do a little bit more with Revival Survival. So midway through that, we actually realised we could get away with more sprites per line than we thought we could. And that meant that offsetting the stuff into the border was more easily possible. There's only so many things you can do with it, but yeah, this isn't actually drawn as text, it's actually drawn as sprites. And that takes up some of the sprite allocation when it draws the screen. So yeah, it's a really good way of using it, and I suppose in a way it retains some of that Spectrum feel, in that like the border space is there and recognisable, but at least you're able to do something even mildly mildly handy with it. I mean, previously I'd suggested a couple of games whereby maybe, for example, if you've ever played on the Super Game Boy, on the SNES, you had custom borders you could put around the screen. I've said if you had quite a basic game, for example, so say, if you've ever played a game maybe like Mario's Picross or Columns maybe, or something like Zoop or something like that. I don't know how familiar you are with those games, but where you've got a little less action going on in the middle of the screen, I said it might be possible for someone who's willing to experiment to actually maybe draw a lot into that area and use, rather than using the sprite allocation in the centre of the screen, to use a sprite allocation to draw a really nice border area. You know, I mean, I suppose as far as certain arcade games go, if you did a very basic arcade game which doesn't use a lot of sprites and initially only had, maybe like a black and white display, for example, something like Boot Hill, or maybe not Space Invaders because we've got quite a high sprite count, but something like Boot Hill or, Night Driver maybe, or some of the more basic old black and white games, I suppose it may be possible to draw in the border area a bezel which is very much like the arcade bezel, much like YamYam can do on the PC. I think that would be quite an interesting use of the border. And I've said it'd be nice to see games, thinking of one for example, I think one of the Bomberman games on Game Boy, when you put it on the Super Game Boy, it would draw like spectator stands around the outside. I'd like to see someone utilise that, if nothing else, just for a technical standpoint. Maybe create a really basic, game in the middle of the screen, is it Tank Battle? Is it on the sort of combat on the Atari 2600? Something like that, where there's not much moving, and then you use that border space to draw something really nice. I think that it'd be interesting to see how people utilise that space. There you go, using tiles or sprites. There you go. So yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities. There's so much can be tried out on the Next that hasn't been kind of investigated or looked into yet, and I think people are gonna start doing a lot more with it. This is just a very basic use of it, and it's something that everyone's finding very handy to do, because if you haven't got to give up that 256 by 192 screen space to things like boring things like scores, then you're making a bigger display, you're making something a bit more colourful, and you're making something that sets the Next display apart from the original Spectrum's display, if you know what I mean, which obviously couldn't do anything with that border space besides display a certain colour. There we go. Tim's just said, same as Gary uses for the new ZX ZVM text adventure modes. You've got a text adventure, which everybody used to love back on these. You're just using text on the screen. Think about the scenes you could set by creating a tile map for the border area. So, I mean, if you think about something like Lord of the Rings, the typical fantasy setting, you start in the Shire, you could have the border space draw, trees and, rivers and stuff like that. It wouldn't be very wide, of course. Maybe you could do more at the sides than you can at the top and bottom, but that would then start to see more use of the side spaces. If you think about something that's been released in recent years, like the NES Mini or the SNES Mini, they have, because they like to keep the aspect ratio 4:3, they've done something with that space at the side of your screen. Now, even though it won't extend all the way across, at the very least, you'll still have something in the border space to make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more visually appealing. And even that very minor use could increase, how people perceive the newer games. So, yeah. So anyway, guys, I've been yapping on for about an hour and a half now. I'll just give you a few details on it. So, Bubblegum Brothers is about to be released. I believe it's released on the 1st of June, so just a couple of days away. There is going to be a physical release of this again. It will be $10.99 for the physical release, and it will only be £4.50 for the digital release. So Adrian's actually dropped the price of that slightly, and I do think at those prices you should definitely give it a whirl. Maybe if you've kind of taken a plunge on the first couple of physical copies and think, okay, well, maybe I don't want to kind of drop that much on this one, then the digital copy is a bit cheaper, and for £4.50, I've wasted more money than that on dodgy mobile game, stupid like microtransactions. So to pay £4 for a decent little bubble platformer, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And of course, for the collectors out there like myself, I have got a full physical copy coming soon, and it's nice to have the physical collection. The physical box will again be in keeping with his current theming. I think it comes in a pink box this time, though. Is it an orange box? No, pink box. And you will get a little piece of bubblegum in there as well. Just another little touch, I think he's gone that extra mile with that, there's a few things to be said for some of the presentation within the coding, but at least he's going that extra mile to give a little extra in a packaged game that you wouldn't otherwise get, you know what I mean? So that's quite nice. But yeah, as a game, Bubblegum Brothers, it's got a few less features than maybe I would have hoped to have found. It's very different from what I originally pictured in my mind, and it is more like, I don't know, it's not even like Snow Brothers. It's more like, trying to think of a good analogy for it, but yeah, it's more of a platform shooter than it is a platform trapper, and capturing game like Bubble Bobble is. And for what it is, it's still a good bit of fun. It does have its few flaws. Maybe some of those are just indicators of the way Adrian programs or the way he designs. He's very steadfast and very adamant about the way he designs things, but at very least he kind of sticks to his guns. And yeah, there you go, Jeremy, Flimbo's Quest, yeah. But yeah, it's a fun game. He's definitely addressed some of the things that people have said about his recent games, and I suppose putting himself out there first, he has done a lot for the system in doing that, but he's also put himself at the forefront of obviously being ready for some criticism, so he's got to be able to deal with that. And obviously now we're on the 5th game, people are starting to ask these questions about the odd little thing, and yeah, things like the odd collision detection, the randomness of the drops perhaps, maybe a little bit more polish in, like I say, the thing about the 1-player and 2-player thing, that was slightly odd in my book, and being able to add support for more things like proper controllers and things like that, I do think needs to start being implemented now. But yeah, this is definitely a fun game. He's definitely added a few things in there that people have suggested. We've now got in-game music, which is quite good and doesn't piss you off. You can turn things on and off like the animations and the music. You've got remappable controls, and I think with 2-player mode, this will have a little bit more longevity. It's certainly a challenge. It's nowhere near as easy as some of the earlier games, and yeah, it's a nice game. I think I'll be honest, of all the games that I've played so far of Adrian's, this might not have impressed me as much when I first played it, probably because I've played so many other games on the NEX now. However, it's probably one of the most playable, if you know what I mean. It's definitely one of the most playable. I do like it, and yeah, I do recommend that people get it. At very least, if you're not a collector, give the digital version a try. There is only a limited amount of the physical versions anyway, so I suppose only the hardcore collectors will buy that. But yeah, give it a pop, you know what I mean? Try it out. I enjoy it, and I think in 2-player, you'll get a decent kick out of it. Certainly a good evening's worth of play once you know what you're doing, and you can progress to the end. And it certainly gives your hand-eye coordination a workout. But yeah, I mean, I am going to leave on a positive note. But yeah, there's a few little things which Adrian needs to do now to be able to step up any future games coming out, and hopefully he'll continue to take on board a few things that are being said, which probably aren't just indicative of him, but maybe some of the other developers who've not put themselves in front of everyone in the way that he has so far, who are maybe developing more basic games and have thought, well, looked at criticisms that some of Adrian's games have had and thought, well, maybe I should rethink this part of mine, that we haven't seen, but they're doing as well. Darkening the backgrounds, adding stage music, it's all things that needed to be done. But yeah, Bubblegum Brothers, pretty good game. Do like it, and if you do like Bubble Bobble, I think you'll get a good kick out of it. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, guys. I know I do tend to ramble on a bit, but you've got to see what it's all about anyway, and it'll be released in a few days' time, so if you want to try it out for yourself, you'll be able to. It'll be on display at Revival in 2 weeks' time, along with all of the other games you've seen so far, probably the latest builds of all the games you see so far. And having 8 next out, you're going to be able to sit down and play whatever you want to this time. You're not just going to be limited to 1 or 2 that are being used to just demonstrate something. So yeah, you'll be able to play all of these in 2 weeks' time, including our own game. And hope to see you all there. But I'll be back with another YamYam Retro gaming stream soon. So just leave any comments and suggestions, and I'll address them when I get round to it. See you later.